Gentlelady yields back. We're joined today by Mr. Jason Van Tavenhove and Mr. Stephen Ayers. Mr. Tatenhove is an artist and journalist. He's a former spokesman of the Oath Keepers and a former close associate of Elmer Stewart Rhodes, the founder and president of the Oath Keepers, who has been charged with seditious conspiracy in relation to the Capitol attack. Mr. Van Tatenhove broke with the Oath Keepers and has since spoken out forcefully against the violent group. Mr. Ayers is a former supporter of President Trump. He answered the president's call to come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. He marched to the Capitol on the president's orders. He pleaded guilty last month to disorderly and disruptive conduct at the Capitol. Mr. Ayers, who no longer supports President Trump, came forward voluntarily to share his story as a warning. I will now swear in our witnesses. The witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. I recognize myself for questions. Today, we've discussed how President Trump summoned an angry mob of supporters to Washington, D.C., many of whom came prepared to do battle against police and politicians alike. We're fortunate enough to be joined by two witnesses who can help us understand who was in the mob that day. Both hardcore violent extremists like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys and average Trump supporters swept up in the fervor of the day. Mr. Van Tatenhove, can you help us understand who the Oath Keepers are?
I can, thank you. My time with the Oath Keepers began back at Bundy Ranch with that first standoff when I went to cover them as an independent journalist. I then subsequently covered two more standoffs, the Sugar Pine Mine standoff and the White Hope Mine standoff. It was at that time that I was offered a job as national media director and an associate editor for the webpage. So I spent a few years with the Oath Keepers, and I can tell you that they may not like to call themselves a militia, but they are. They're a violent militia, and they are largely Stewart Rhodes. And I think, rather than try to use words, I think the best illustration for what the Oath Keepers are happened January 6th, when we saw that stacked military formation going up the stairs of our Capitol. I saw radicalization that started with my beginning of my time with them and continued over a period of time as the member base and who it was that Stewart Rhodes was courting drifted further and further right into the alt-right world, into white nationalists, and even straight up racists. And it came to a point where I could no longer continue to work for them. But the Oath Keepers are a dangerous militia that is in large part fed by the ego and drive of Stewart Rhodes, who at times seemed to see himself as this paramilitary leader. I think that drove a lot of it. So, in my opinion, the Oath Keepers are a very dangerous organization.
Well, thank you very much. You've talked a little bit about that danger. So, what is the Oath Keepers' vision for America, and why should Americans be concerned about it?
I think we saw a glimpse of what the vision of the Oath Keepers is on January 6th. It doesn't necessarily include the rule of law. It doesn't necessarily include, it includes violence. It includes trying to get their way through lies, through deceit, through intimidation, and through the perpetration of violence. The swaying of people who may not know better through lies and rhetoric and propaganda that can get swept up in these moments. And I'll admit I was swept up at one point as well too. But I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, it does, and you talk about being swept up. So at what point did you break with the Oath Keepers?
There came a point, there were many red flags, and I probably should have broke with them much earlier than I did. But the straw that broke the camel's back really came when I walked into a grocery store. We were living up in the very remote town of Eureka, Montana, and there was a group of core members of the group of the Oath Keepers and some associates, and they were having a conversation at that public area where they were talking about how the Holocaust was not real. And that was, for me, something I just could not abide. And, you know, we were not wealthy people at all. We were barely surviving, and it didn't matter. I went home to my wife and my kids, and I told them that I've got to walk away at this point. I don't know how we're going to survive or where we're going to go or what we're going to do, but I just can no longer continue, and put in my resignation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ayers, there were many people in the crowd that day, January 6th, including you, who were not part of an extremist group. I'd like to start by having you tell the American people a little bit about yourself. Can you tell us about your life before January 6th?
Yeah, basically nothing but a family man and a working man. Worked at the company, a cabinet company up in Northeast Ohio for going on 20 years. You know, family's my life. I was a supervisor there, so that took up a lot of my a lot of my free time. Other than that, with my family, camping, playing basketball, playing games with my son.
Just what any ordinary American citizen, family man would do.
Yep, exactly.
So this committee has reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage from January 6th. During this review, we identified you entering the Capitol as we see in this video. Mr. Ayers, why did you decide to come to Washington on January 6th?
For me personally, I was, pretty hardcore into the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I followed, President Trump, on all of the websites, he basically put out, come to Stop the Steal rally, and I felt like I needed to be down here.
So you basically learned about the rally on social media and at some point made a decision to come to Washington.
Yep. I had some friends I found out were coming down, and I just hopped on with them right at the tail end when I found out and came down here with them.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the vice chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any questions that she may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ayers, when you entered the Capitol last year, did you believe that the election had been stolen?
At that time, yeah. Everything that I was seeing online, I definitely believed that that's exactly what that was the case.
And when you heard from President Trump that the election was stolen, how did that make you feel?
Oh, I was very upset, as were most of his supporters. That's basically what got me to come down here.
And do you still believe the election was stolen?
Not so much now. I got away from all the social media when January 6th happened. Basically deleted it all. You know, I started doing my own research and everything, and for me, for something like that to be that, for that to actually take place, it's too big. You know, there's no way you can keep something like that quiet, as big as something like that. You know, with all the lawsuits being shot down one after another, that was mainly what convinced me.
Well, and I think that's very important. And we've also talked about today and in previous hearings the extent to which the president himself was told that the election hadn't been stolen by his Justice Department, by his White House counsel, by his campaign. Would it have made a difference to you to know that President Trump himself had no evidence of widespread fraud?
Oh, definitely. You know, who knows? I may not have come down here then. You know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, earlier today we showed how Donald Trump's December 19th tweet summoned both extremist groups as well as rank and file supporters of President Trump to come to Washington, D.C., average Americans. He told them to, quote, "Be there, we'll be wild," and they came. We showed how how President Trump repeatedly told them, "Fight, fight, fight," and they marched to the Capitol. Mr. Ayers, you were in that crowd at the rally, and then the crowd that marched to the Capitol. When you arrived on the ellipse that morning, were you planning on going to the Capitol?
No, we didn't actually plan to go down there. You know, we went basically to see the Stop the Steal rally, and that was it.
So why'd you decide to march to the Capitol?
Well, basically, you know, the president, you know, got everybody riled up, told everybody to head on down. So we basically were just following what he said.
After the president's speech, as you're marching down to the Capitol, how did you feel?
I was, you know, I'm angry, you know, after everything that was basically said in the speech. You know, a lot of the stuff he said, he already put out in tweets. I've already seen it and heard it before. So, I mean, I was already worked up, and so were most of the people there.
So as you started marching, did you think there was still a chance the election would be overturned?
Yeah, at that time I did, you know, because everybody was kind of like in the hope that, you know, Vice President Pence was not going to certify the election. You know, also the whole time on our way down there, we kept hearing about this big reveal I remember us talking about, and we kind of thought maybe that was it. So that hope was there.
Did you think that the president would be marching with you?
Yeah, I think everybody thought he was going to be coming down. You know, he said in his speech, you know, kind of like he's going to be there with us. So, I mean, I believed it.
I understand. We know that you illegally entered the Capitol that afternoon and then left the Capitol area later on. What made you decide to leave?
Basically, when President Trump put his tweet out, we literally left right after that come out. You know, to me, if he would have done that earlier in the day, 1:30, you know, we wouldn't be in this, maybe we wouldn't be in this bad of a situation or something.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.